when it comes to Team USA, as I asked earlier, is it gold or bust for the Americans? What do you think? Because I look at their roster and I look at how they played against the Latvians. Now, obviously, Team Latvia is a far cry from Team Sweden, Team Finland, Czech Republic. Hell, definitely a far cry from the Canadians, right? But if you look at the roster and you look at the talent that the Americans have put on the NHL stage over the last decade or so, the gap between them and the Canadians, isn't even there, right? I mean, as I said on our preview episode, the Canadians definitely have the best forward group in the entire tournament. I mean, Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, Sidney Crosby, just to name your top three centers. And it's, if Sidney Crosby is your third line center, then what is there to even say? But then you have young phenoms like Macklin Celebrini, right, that are just up and coming. So the Canadians forward group is the best in the tournament, no doubt about it. But on paper, the Americans have the best D-core in the tournament and the best goaltending in the tournament and the second best forward core in the tournament. Team USA has come so far. USA Hockey has come so far since the last time the NHL has had players play in the Olympics. And just as an example, I'm going to read off right now the 2014 U.S. men's Olympic roster for Team USA. This is the last time that the NHL played in the Olympics. This is the roster that the Americans sent. David Backes, Dustin Brown, Ryan Callahan, John Carlson, Justin Falk, Cam Fowler, Jimmy Howard, Patrick Kane, Ryan Kessler, Phil Kessel, Paul Martin, Ryan McDonough, Ryan Miller, Brooks Orpik, TJ Oshie, Max Pacioretty, Zach Parise, Joe Pavelski, Jonathan Quick, Kevin Shattenkirk, Paul Stastny, Derek Stepan, Ryan Suter, James Van Riemsdyk, and Blake Wheeler. Here's their roster for 2026. Matt Boldy, Kyle Connor, Jack Eichel, Brock Faber, Jake Gensel, Noah Hanifin, Connor Hellebuck, Jack Hughes, Quinn Hughes, Clayton Keller, Jackson Lacombe, Dylan Larkin, Austin Matthews, Charlie McAvoy, JT Miller, Brock Nelson, Jake Ottinger, Jake Sanderson, Jacob Slavin, Jeremy Swayman, Tage Thompson, Brady Tkachuk, Matthew Tkachuk, Vinny Trocheck, Zach Werenski. And then, of course, Jason Robertson and Cole Caulfield are the two top American goal scorers in the NHL this year, and they're not on the roster. So that 2014 U.S. roster I read off, it was a blue-collar roster. And they fought tooth and nail with the Canadians in the semifinals and lost a close one. I think they lost 1-0. And their roster that they brought to the Olympics in 2010, where they beat the Canadians and then lost in the gold medal game to Sidney Crosby in overtime, that roster was relatively blue collar. Like, you have Patrick Kane on both of those rosters. You have Phil Kessel. You know, there was some skill. John Carlson's on the 14 roster. He had some skill and some youth at the time. But the roster that I just read off, the speed and the skill is night and day. Night and day. Jack Eichel, Austin Matthews, Jack Hughes, Quinn Hughes, Kyle Connor, Dylan Larkin, Charlie McAvoy, the Tkachuk brothers. Like, it's the Matt Boldy, the talent, Tage Thompson. It's stupid talent. So it's a long-winded way of me saying that, yes, it's absolutely gold or bust for the Americans. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Now, unfortunately, they're kind of in between a rock and a hard place, because the standard for them and the expectation is and should be gold. But the Canadians are the favorite. They should be. Right? I mean, they're the defending champions of the world when it comes to NHL players at the Olympics. The Canadians have won the last 2 Olympic Games and 3 of the last 4 when NHL players are at the Olympics. 2018, 2022. Listen, good stories for the Olympic athletes of Russia and Team Finland, but with all due respect to the athletes who participated in those games, it wasn't best on best. And I know that here in America, we glorify the 1980 Olympic hockey team, and that was a team full of amateurs. Now, technically, the Soviets in that tournament, they were technically not professional athletes because they were soldiers by via paperwork, but their job was to play hockey. So they were professional athletes. They beat the NHL All-Stars months before the Olympic Games. But as I said, they were soldiers. So they weren't professional athletes. Well, they were. And that's why Miracle on Ice is a Miracle on Ice, because it was it was a bunch of young amateur college kids who defeated unofficially professional athletes, Russian athletes who were just dominating the world of hockey for 2 decades. And the reason I bring that up is that Miracle on Ice story is such a amazing sports story because it wasn't professional athletes for the Americans. And even in the movie, now this, I don't think it was a real quote from Herb Brooks. It may have just been Disney taking some liberties with the script. But Herb Brooks says at the end of the game, or at the end of the movie, that the following Olympics, they started using NHL players at the Olympics and started having dream teams. And he says, which is ironic because now that we have dream teams, there's no more reasons to dream. And so, fast forward to modern day, in the last couple, the last 20, 30 years, it has been dream teams, but that's the way that the world has gone the last 2-3 decades, and it's what we're used to now. So I don't mean to demean or belittle the 2018 and 2022 Olympic Games because they weren't professional athletes, or they weren't NHL athletes, at least. It's a great story for those players in particular, but we can't in good conscience look at the 2022 and 2018 Olympics and where Canada didn't win gold and say that, hey, they haven't won the last few Olympics, because that's technically true, but we all know the score there. So for the Americans this year, it is difficult because they have the expectations of winning gold. That's what they're putting on themselves, and that's what the outside world is putting on them. Obviously, in Canada, the gold they think belongs to them. But it's not an easy spot for the Americans to have the same standard as the Canadians, which is gold, but you're not the favorite. So if they're not the favorite, then they should be saying, well, what's with the expectations on us to win gold if we're not the favorite? But they're so close to the Canadians. And honestly, the Canadians are the favorites because of pedigree. The Canadians are the favorites because they have the 3 best players in the world on their roster, but they also have a bunch of players that have won big games, both at the NHL level and internationally. I mean, Sidney Crosby is the most decorated player that's currently playing. They have a bunch of Stanley Cup champions on their roster and guys that have won at every level and every stage. And Hockey Canada, until they're dethroned with NHL representation at the Olympics, they are the favorite. But I think there's a real argument to be made that the Americans have the best overall roster at the tournament. And if that's the case, then you bet your ass that you should be winning gold. That should be the standard. So we'll see how the rest of the tournament plays out. And as far as the Americans and the Canadians go, they have to take care of business themselves if they want to meet each other at some point. I imagine that if the Americans win Group C and the Canadians win Group A, I imagine that their goal differentials will be so great that they'll probably be 1 and 2 in the standings overall, and that they'll probably be put into different brackets at the quarterfinals. And so if they win out in the playoffs or the medal round, um, they should be on a collision course for the gold medal game. There could be a scenario where they meet in the semifinals, but I'm not expecting that. So hopefully both teams can take care of business and we can see a not even David versus Goliath, Goliath versus Goliath matchup in the gold medal game.